Hi, friends. Welcome to the March 2023 Live with Laurelei monthly question and answer session for the Red Thread Academy. I'm Laurelei, in case you haven't met me yet, through one of our social Zooms or one of these monthly Q&As or some other way we might have met. As we usually do, I'm going to go ahead and record. I am recording the session, the discussion part that I prepare, so that we're going to start from here. Hi, Witchy family. Welcome to the March 2023 Live with Laurelei monthly question and answer session. It happens on the first Sunday of every month at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So if you want to join one of these actually live, make sure that you put that in your calendar. Links are accessible through the Thread app for the Red Thread Academy in the RTA Basics section. Today, the recorded part of this session is going to be about how to actually use the course guide and some questions that I get asked pretty frequently from people who have freshly downloaded the app, freshly downloaded the book or purchased the book and had it shipped to them and have some questions about just how to get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to share this part of my screen, which is looking at the table of contents in the PDF version of the book. Now it's going to look the same in your printed version of the book. There is no difference between the two, except that one's digitized. So I want to draw your attention to this part right here. Before you actually get into the lessons, there is a 9-page chapter just on how to use the course guide, and it's followed by a couple of tables, the student progress checklist and the weekly suggested lesson progression, or dyslexia, suggested weekly lesson progression. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll to where those are. And of course, you can see all the lessons are here. I'm going to point out while we're here that the lessons themselves are grouped thematically. So they're grouped based on whatever these unit goals are. And these are the kind of the big learning objectives that we have at each step along the way. But we're not necessarily, I don't necessarily recommend trying to start on page 17 and go straight through to the end of the book. I don't find that to be the most user-friendly way. It might be the most intuitive because we normally start at the beginning of a book and just read through the end. But these lessons build on each other. And so you're probably going to do at least the first two of these right off, but then really I would suggest that you jump around and get some other things done. And then you may come back to things, So it may be like an all of unit 1, and then maybe by then you're ready for one of the Sabbats. So you might jump over and do, your in-bulk Sabbat, and then come back and do, understanding the cosmology of the craft, and do lesson 1, Wheel of the Year. So it might kind of be all over the place. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Like I said, right now I'm going to scroll down to where how to use this course guide is. And my sense is, and I am definitely not trying to call anybody out on this, but my sense is that some of the folks who purchase the book skip this part entirely because they go, I know how to use a book. You start at the beginning and read and do the lessons and then go to the next one. But I kind of don't recommend that. So please make sure that you've read these 9 pages at the beginning. There are some reminders in here that I would like for you to have. One of them is this course is paced so that you can complete it and do all the lessons. And do all of the lessons in 1 year. 52 weeks, there are 51 lessons, I think. However, If that ends up not being what happens with you, because maybe you have super busy times in the summer, and so you really can't commit to doing a single lesson every week in the summer, or maybe you have seasonal affective disorder and your winters are really hard and you kind of just focus on survival during the winter. It's a perfectly legitimate witchy goal, by the way. Just survive the winter. Um, you know, it may take you longer and you are in good company. It takes most folks more than 1 year, by a lot, like not more than a year by a lot, but by a lot in terms of most. Like most people who do this program, are going to struggle. They're going to have weeks that they have to take off or lessons that are going to take them longer than that week to do. There's a checklist. We're going to look at that in a moment. The order of the lessons, this is where we're talking about that. So I don't necessarily recommend doing the lessons in the order of the table of contents. I recommend doing them in something like the progression that I have listed. I think it's on page 17, and we'll get to that in a second. But you're not required to do them in that order. If you want to do them in a different order, that's fine. If you want to knock out 2 or 3 lessons in 1 week and then, take 2 or 3 weeks to do a single lesson, that's fine. It's self-paced for a reason because you know what makes sense to you. I do recommend that folks plan ahead. And that's what we're talking about here in this section. There are 4 book analyses that you're going to do over the course of year 1 by itself, right? And I say year 1 in quotes, air quotes, because it may take you much longer than a year, and that's okay. There are 3 forms of divination that you're going to be proving yourself proficient in. And both of these sets of lessons are things that you're almost certainly not going to do in a single week, right? Maybe you will. Maybe you will. I am not challenging you. If you are the kind of person to sit down and read a book starting on Sunday and then you've got it done and have the book analysis written by Saturday, and that all happens in a 7-day progression, then more power to you. I am not that person. I am not that person. So just give yourself some space to do those so that you're not looking toward the end going, oh my gosh, I still have to read 4 books and do, full moon workings and document that and then do my divination. I haven't even started on that. Like that's going to feel very overwhelming if you don't give yourself some space and time to do that. Other things to be, and I'll just add this in here, right? So, because this particular Live with Laurelei is about using the book and navigating the book, but there are some other things that I wanted to bring up that are also sort of among the frequently asked questions or comments or feedback, complaints from students that are just getting started or that have been working on it for a couple months. When you start getting into rituals, and that might be, I mean, it's going to be in the first 6 to 8 weeks that you've started the course, because that's about how far out the Sabbats are spaced, right? Is about every 6 to 8 weeks. You don't have to have all the tools. You don't have to have any tools. Don't let not having tools hold you back from doing the rituals. I am not even kidding. If the thing that you need to use for a while is a forked twig that you found, in your yard or in the park for the stang, that works for the moment. You may not be walking the compass using it in exactly that way, but it can still be there and serve, sort of as that focal point of the crossroads for you. If you need to use a flat rock as your anvil until you have an anvil that makes sense for you. And there are lots of different kinds of anvils. There are little jeweler's anvils that are very small and portable and relatively like pretty inexpensive. But a flat rock was what our very deep past ancestors used as anvils when they first started doing some of that metal working. Just something that's not going to break when you're hitting it with a hammer or with another flat rock to be able to pound things flat. That works. That can be your oath stone. That can be the anvil in your compass. Um, the 3 knives. If you don't have 3 knives, it's okay. It's okay, I promise. You can use one knife um, for all three purposes if that's what you prefer. Um, you can, like a lot of folks come with 2 knives already, something that functions as the white handled knife, and something that functions as the black handled knife, or the Kerfane and the Athame. They don't have to be that color. Don't feel like I have 3 knives, but I don't have a actually red knife. I have one that I use, to draw blood, but I don't have one that, it's not actually red. So now I have to go get a new knife. No, you don't. That is your red knife. Red is a symbolic distinction that we give it instead of always calling it the shelg. But you can use what you've got and what makes sense until you're able to get the things that you would like to have serving in those capacities. Same thing with like ritual robes and that kind of thing. I would suggest that you have something, in the light half of the year that you're wearing something light colored, and that you have a light colored, white or close to white, something that you can put over your head to like block out your vision for when you're doing trance work. But and in the dark half of the year have something black that does the same thing, whether it's got a hood attached to it or it's a scarf or a head wrap or something else that you put like over your eyes. Um, I've seen people do this with literally a hoodie kind of jacket. That is fine. This is, I want this work to be accessible to people and to be accessible financially as well. So don't stop yourself because you don't have the tools and the Sabbat rituals are written as if you've got the tools. Find stand-ins that work for you. Most of the tools exist within your own body anyway, on some level. So find that place in yourself that is that tool and use that. Okay, so going back to, I'm not going to read all of the nature of the work to you. Like, I'm not going to read this section or go into it much, but this is work that is guided by you within the structure of what the RTA, the Red Thread Academy and Spiral Castle does. So me as the teacher, again in air quotes, as the teacher over here, um, I'm giving you the framework in which to explore these ideas, and I'm certainly happy to talk with you about them. But I'm not telling you what you have to think or what you have to do, or that you even have to do this at this time in this way. There is much room for adaptation and modifying and still being sort of within um, the vibes of the Red Thread Academy. Um, what's traditional about the Red Thread Academy's craft? I encourage you to read that, especially if you are coming from a place of, this looks more Wiccan than I want it to look, or I don't know what the difference between, folkloric craft, trad craft, and sort of more Wiccan or ceremonial forms of the craft look like. This is a good place to see where we fit on that spectrum, because it is a continuum and we have our spot within it. That's a whole other Live with Laurelei session, though. Okay, so sharing of assignments. I've got a whole other video on the student mentor relationship within the Red Thread Academy. So if you've got questions, I highly recommend that you watch that video. It's accessible through the Thread app, and I've made it publicly available on the Red Thread Academy YouTube page, so that you can get to it through that YouTube channel if you want. If you're interested in mentorship, I'm going to point out here that, and I'm going to remember, it says page 8 up here. It's page 4 printed all the way at the back of the book. Past the Book of Shadows pages, there is some back matter And one of them, this is on page 491 in your book, is a whole section about personal mentoring with me, if that's something that you're interested in. And as we get people that are ready to offer personal mentoring in other parts of the world, really, because we're all over the US, we're into Canada, hello, and elsewhere. There are people that are taking these classes, taking this class in other parts of the world. As we get other RTA mentors, at that third degree level that are interested in providing these services, it won't just be me offering them. But right now it's just me. This is some information about what it looks like and what to expect. You can set that up as a monthly thing that we're doing where we're meeting once a month. Or you can do it quarterly if that makes more sense. If the price point's too high for you and you're like, I think just once every 3 months would be fine, then we can set that up that way too. So you can email me, at the email address that's included in the book, or you can contact me through the Thread app as well to get started with that. And we're going back up to where we were. Okay, so personal mentoring. I highly encourage folks, though, with sharing assignments to share with the group and to start sort of like to look at other people's work, to check back to the Thread app often and see, what's been posted in the student sections and that kind of thing, just to have a feel for like what's happening with other RTAers and start to build that relationship. Scoring of assignments really only happens with me if you are engaged in a mentoring relationship. But I encourage you to think about how you would score yourself if you were the person looking at these assignments. Do you feel like you've gained mastery in this? Do you feel like that you're proficient, but that you still have a ways to go before you would sort of claim mastery for yourself? Or do you feel like it's something that you're still developing a sense of what's going on with the topic? If you're still in that developing place, don't consider it done until you get to proficient, at least. You don't, I mean, and I'm going to say you don't have to be hitting mastery on everything. Proficiency is good. You've got years ahead of you to keep working on your craft. I was not a master of anything when I first started my journey with witchcraft. I felt like an absolute novice all the time about everything. That's normal. It's perfectly normal. I've been doing this for almost 30 years now. So there are some areas where I feel adept. I feel like maybe I have a level of mastery in certain areas and others where I'm just proficient. And probably a couple, like there are new things that I'm studying too, where I'm definitely in those developing stages and I'm still learning. You know, I am definitely in the developing stages for things like poison plant allyship and using poisons in witchcraft for entheogens and other kinds of work. But in terms of just straight herbal use, I'm proficient heading toward mastery, right? Supplies and materials, this is where, again, I kind of reiterate about don't let not having materials or tools stop you from doing the work. There may be some things that you need to get, but there are almost always low cost, no cost options for that, including things like divination. If you're dead set on doing tarot, you're going to have a tarot deck, you know. Um, but you can find those. You can find some. You can find them used, although people have feelings about using used tarot decks. You might be gifted one from somebody if you put it out there that you want one. Um, there are places all over the internet where you can print out basic tarot cards, like in a Rider-Waite style. just print them out onto cardstock of your own, cut them out, and then start using them. They work great. They work just as well as any other tarot card does. So feel free to explore those alternative ways of getting those things. Additional resources. Almost every lesson has some additional resources, including the BOS pages, the Book of Shadows pages. I'm going to scroll us down again to the back of the book. Sorry if it makes you dizzy. Okay, so about halfway through the book is where, a little more than halfway, I guess, is where the Book of Shadows pages start. These are supplemental. I want to reiterate that these are not the lessons themselves. You will be missing a lot if you only look at the Book of Shadows pages. They are nice to have, and they are offered here as like a bonus to the actual content of the book. You can print these out if you've got the PDF version of the book, if that's something that you're interested in, and you can put them in your own binder and organize them in a way that makes sense to you. I will say that one of the things that I have heard is that it's frustrating for some folks, like these pages aren't numbered. They're not numbered because the expectation is that you're going to, if you're using these, you're going to be collecting these into potentially a whole different volume that is yours. And that, like, in the next year, I'm going to be giving you more pages that fit into many of these same categories over time. So, for instance, I've crossed over here I went from Liber Cain. Let me get down to where I'm below, into ritual, liturgy, and spells. Well, there's going to be ritual, liturgy, and spells every single year. There's going to be something that you're going to add to that if you continue with the practice. So in the lesson assignments, where it says additional materials. Sorry, I'm just randomly picking a page. So in additional resources, there's, in this particular case, there's a ritual planning worksheet that's on the very next page. And then there are BOS pages that are included based on the topic that this lesson was about. And it'll just say participant roles and ritual preparation. Well, considering that we're talking about ritual planning basics, you can guess that those are going to be in the ritual section. I feel like it's fairly intuitive where there might be, and they're definitely set up in kind of in a way for you to create your own organization, because we don't all set up our books the same way because our brains don't work the same way. Okay, so going back up to the beginning of the book, we were looking at the additional resources there. There's also a blog at spiralcastletrad.wordpress.com. That blog's been largely imported into the Thread app as well. But if you prefer to look at it on a computer screen or in a different way than the way that it's presented in the app, or if you struggle with the app for some reason, if that's difficult to navigate, you can get to it directly from this link. Usually, very often, I also link like additional reading materials. You don't have to read every book that I list. If you do, you are amazing and are doing a lot of reading. Don't feel like you have to, buy and read every single book that's in the sort of recommended reading or the additional resources for that lesson, because that's going to keep you doing this work for a long time. But if something's really calling to you, or if you want to dig into a topic more, that's what that's there for. Final exam, initiation, and certificate. In years 1 and 2, the initiation is self-conducted. You're doing that for yourself based on a ritual that is laid out at the end of the book. The final exam is honestly part of the initiation. So when you, sorry, the headset always clicks off because there's no input coming in from like other people talking into it. Um, Once you start the final exam, you've kind of started the initiation. You don't have to do them all together. It's just that you've begun that process. You've taken that step. If you would like a certificate, I do have certificates available for folks that would like to have that sort of visual documentation of I did this, and here's what I've done. So you can let me know when you've done that initiation if you want that cert. If I haven't been seeing your work up until that point, if we haven't been doing individual mentoring, I'll probably ask for a couple of like random assignments to see, and you can just pop those over to me, and then that way I can confirm, yep, it looks like you've been doing the stuff. And then for what comes next, you are never compelled to take the next level of study. You're in year one, you don't have to take year two. If you're in year two and you're finishing that up, you don't have to take year three. It's all about what your own goals are and what you want to achieve through this study, but those are available to you. And they will take you both deeper and higher into your practice. And then there are some discounts, and the Thread app QR code is here. There's also, I can send you a link to it if you'd prefer the links directly instead of having the QR code. And then you are always welcome. This is not the right version of the book. That's weird. Okay. I might have to fix that. So this is supposed to say, if you have more questions, you can contact me at the same email address that's listed in other places. So I think there are a couple of different places where my email address is listed, and certainly at the end of the book, it's listed there. I don't know why this is blank here, and I apologize for that because in my copy of the book, this page 9 has the last like line or two on here. So that's a weird thing. That must have been something that happened when I converted it to PDF. Apologies. I'll get that sorted out. Okay, so looking at the student progress checklist. This is that checklist that I mentioned that has all of the assignments listed in the same order that they are on your table of contents. This is the checklist that I use for folks that are sending me their work to see. I'll put the date that I receive it, or if they've dated the assignment, like on the actual write-up, I'll put that date in there, and then the score that they've received as well. And this is just a quick reference of like, if I'm seeing ones in here, then I know that I need to see at least a 2 before we move on to something like initiation, right? So before you would do initiation, you'd make sure that you felt like you were a 2. Or if you're having me look at your work, that you're getting that, hey, you're proficient, or you've actually, like you're well on your way to mastery, or you've mastered this before you move on. But this goes in that sort of book format order. The next page, page 15, is where the suggested weekly lesson progression happens. If you are approaching these with a study group, if you are really, I feel like even just doing these on your own, but in a study group where everybody's coming at it from like a different place and you don't know exactly what their background already is, you really don't want to just, sort of start at the dedication and then go through all of unit 1 straight down to unit 12 where the initiation's happening. You want to scaffold things so that a person might not be able to reach this content that's way up here, but if you give them a platform, they can stand here and now they can reach it, and then they're able to pull themselves up to that next level and then be able to reach the next thing. And so things build on each other that way. as opposed to like I'm at the beginning and everything is out of reach. So this is the progression that we use at the home coven. This is exactly the way that we approach this. And often what I do for my own notes when we're going through, a red thread series or a red cord series, dedicant year series, year one work, I put the dates over here, or possibly over on this other side, but I like physically write in the dates of when we were doing that work. Um, if you're working just out of a PDF, you might keep that in a notebook for yourself, or that kind of, or you might print out this page and use it as that sort of checklist. So you know that like I did it, I did the lesson, it's done, and I can move on to the next thing. Yeah. There's some things that are a little flexible in here, like you might not be getting to your first Sabbat by week 4. That might honestly be like the week after your dedication. Maybe you did your dedication on a Sabbath. That happens pretty frequently, actually. My recommendation, if you do that, is to do the Sabbath that's in the book to the best of your ability with the resources that you've got the next week, and then start on the lessons. So there'll be a little bit of jumping around in the sense that I don't know when you're actually getting to do a Sabbath, and I don't know which Sabbath you're doing first. um, Same thing for like book analysis. I've spaced these out, but they might come a little earlier in your lessons or a little later in your lessons than when I have them. So there's a little bit of flexibility. There's a lot of flexibility with this, really. I think so. I'm gonna stop the share over here. We're gonna go back to just this. I think I've shared everything that I wanted to talk about for this particular one. Basically, that the book is not the most user-friendly going from the front cover to the back cover in that way. It is made to be sort of like picked through and dived around into and that kind of thing. All of the lessons have page numbers in that table of contents. It's really just the Book of Shadows pages that don't. Um, if you have other questions, and I know that there are other kinds of questions that get asked, please don't hesitate to write to me and to ask those questions. I'll do my best to answer you in the moment, and they might actually end up being the groundwork for one of these Q&A sessions to make navigating the materials easier. And not just navigating the materials, but also absorbing and working with the materials. We've had lots of like really content-based questions too that have happened in the past before I started recording. So yeah, feel free to send those. And that's all I've got for today. And since I'm bad at conclusions, we'll just stop there and I'll say goodbye. See you soon.